Hello, this is Grandma Lori with the Bible story of Famine, and Joseph saves Israel. Joseph had once been a slave in Egypt, but now he was the prime minister of Egypt, the head governor, second only to Pharaoh himself. Joseph was given a special Egyptian name, Zaphnath-Paneah. It means man who discovers hidden things. And he did, didn't he? He knew the meaning of Pharaoh's dream of 7 fat cows and 7 skinny cows. Just as Pharaoh had dreamed, for 7 good years, the land of Egypt grew more crops than ever before and raised more animals than ever before. Joseph had all of the extra grain saved in giant storage buildings throughout the land. Joseph made sure all of the animals were well-fed and healthy in lush green pastures and had part of their meat dried and saved. After 7 years of superabundant crops and more than plenty of cattle, sheep, and camels, there came a great drought. A drought is when the rain doesn't fall and all the crops die. And if the crops die, the animals starve to death. And if there are no crops or animals, the people starve to death too. This terrible drought happened all over much of Africa and all of the Middle Eastern lands, including Canaan, where Father Israel and his huge family lived. That famine would last for 7 years because God had showed it to Pharaoh in his dreams. The Nile River starts out as many little streams far up in the mountains of Africa. The streams rush downhill and finally join together to become the great Nile River in Egypt. But during the drought, there was almost no rain in Africa, so the Nile River got smaller and smaller till it was barely more than a muddy stream. The people of Egypt had very little water to grow their crops, so there was very little grain, or vegetables, or fruit trees. The animal pastures became bare and dry. Not even weeds could grow, so most of the animals starved and died. Month by month, as the drought got worse and worse, the river grew narrower and more shallow, until even many crocodiles and hippos that lived in the river died. That's when Joseph, the prime minister, opened up all of the grain storage bins and silos that had been saved by the order of Pharaoh during the 7 good years. An army of helpers in every city passed out grain to the hungry people. The people of Egypt were glad and grateful that their king had chosen Joseph to store up food for all these bad years. The people gave their money and valuable possessions to Pharaoh to pay for the grain. So Pharaoh got even more rich too. Well, about 500 miles away in Canaan, things were getting very bad. That's where Father Israel and his 11 sons lived. They were having the same horrible drought, which led to a more horrible famine because they didn't have any river of water, and now no rain. As their animals died of starvation, Israel and his family had nothing to eat but meat of their dead animals, much of which they dried, like jerky. They saved the dried meat for the future, just in case things did not get better. And things did not get better. They got a lot worse. Israel's family and servants all got very skinny and bony and wrinkled without enough food or water. Old people and even tiny babies died because they were too weak to survive. Lots of people in surrounding countries died too. But soon travelers brought word that there was grain and food that could be bought in Egypt. So from hundreds of miles around, caravans traveled to Egypt to buy grain, plus casks of water for their people. Father Israel told his sons, "You must go down to Egypt to buy grain for our families." For some strange reason, all of the sons looked at each other with guilt, as if they didn't want to go down to Egypt. Jacob, Israel, said, "Why are you standing around looking at each other? What's wrong with you? Get your donkey saddled plus a train of camels and get moving. We're starving here." Benjamin, who was Joseph's beloved younger brother, thought this would be a great adventure. He'd never been on any trip farther than the outer pastures. "Me too, Dad. Can I go too?" Israel grabbed his arm. "No, Benjamin, not you. You are too precious to me. I've already lost your brother Joseph. I will not take a chance on losing you too." "Aw, Dad, that's no fair. I never get to go anywhere." And though Benjamin pleaded and begged while his brothers packed for their journey, Father Israel would not change his mind. Meanwhile, in the high court of Egypt, Joseph used interpreters to talk to merchants from many far countries who had come from that far away to buy grain. He knew of their wealth and worked out great prices for Pharaoh. Joseph now looked rich like Pharaoh. He wore a wide, brightly jeweled collar and arm bracelets, a fine pleated linen kilt, and golden sandals. A colorfully striped linen headdress, such as wealthy Egyptian men wore, made him look even taller. The Pharaoh's own ring of power was just one of many rings on his fingers. Joseph's face was clean-shaven like other Egyptians, and he usually wore his chest bare and shaved clean for comfort. Servants cooled him with long-handled fans of ostrich feathers, while scribes crouched beside his throne, writing legal documents on papyrus for the men who came to buy grain. As Joseph turned to one side to instruct a scribe on the last deal, his chief steward announced the next group of visitors. "Your lordship, 10 brothers have come from the land of Canaan to beg your lordship to sell them grain." Joseph's head whipped around, and his eyes widened as 10 bearded men in striped robes kneeled before him, bending their foreheads to the floor. Instantly, an image came before Joseph's memory of a dream he had had long, long ago of 11 sheaves of grain bowing down before one upright sheaf. Taking a deep breath, Joseph stepped forward, but he didn't speak. It was them, his brothers. All of them bowed to the ground before him, just like in his dream. They were scrawny, sun-wrinkled, so much older, and dirty from their long trip. But there were only 10. Joseph had left 11 brothers at home. His eyes quickly scanned the men. He realized his brother Benjamin was not with them. Benjamin would be a young man by now, but he was not among these men. Had his wicked brothers gotten rid of Benjamin too? That thought made Joseph terribly angry. For years he had prayed for the Lord to give him peace in his heart for what these brothers had done to him, tying him up, throwing him in a well, discussing how to kill him, then selling him as a slave. Years of working for Potiphar, more years in prison. His jaws clenched as he beckoned his translator forward. These brothers would certainly not recognize him anymore, and he would pay them back for their cruelty. Joseph spoke harshly in Egyptian, his voice full of anger. "Where did you come from? Why are you here?" The interpreter translated his words into Hebrew for the 10 men. Simeon raised his head and answered in a shaking voice, "Your lordship, we have come from the land of Canaan to buy grain." Though Joseph understood every word, he let the translator repeat their plea to him in Egyptian. Joseph shouted in reply, "No, you are spies. You have come to see how bare the land of Egypt is." Naphtali answered in terror, "No, my lord, no. We are your servants and want only to buy food. Truly, we are all the sons of one man and are honest men, not spies." After waiting for the translation, Joseph barked out, "I say you are spies. Come here to see the weakness of our land so you can plot against us." Simeon lifted his head. "Sir, your servants before you are 12 brothers. The youngest of us is still at home with our father, and one of our brothers is dead." Joseph replied in Egyptian, "So you say, but I think you lie. I will test you rather than kill you now. This is the proof I demand. Bring this youngest brother to me. One of you may go and fetch him. The rest will remain here in prison until he returns. Otherwise, I will know you are spies and will kill you most painfully." The brothers began to plead and babble. "No, please no. Our wives and children will starve. Don't do this thing." Joseph roared, "Silence! Guards, take them all away to prison this instant." Joseph left them in prison for 3 days to think over what they had done and what he, now the governor of Egypt, could do to them. On the 3rd day, Joseph had his brothers brought before him again. He spoke in a more calm voice than before, and the translator passed on his words. "I believe in a God who believes in mercy, so I will allow you to live on one condition." The brothers heard the translator and lifted up their heads with hope, listening for the condition. "If you are honest men, leave one of your brothers here as insurance. Then pay me for Pharaoh's grain, and I will send the rest of you home with enough to save your families. But you must all return, and bring your youngest brother with you. That is the proof I demand." As soon as they understood, the brothers began to talk to each other about the condition. "This is all our fault, a punishment for what we did to Joseph." Another one said, "We saw his anguish and we're guilty of his death. He begged and pleaded, but we ignored him." Still another brother said, "Yes, that's why the Lord is punishing us today." Reuben, the oldest, spoke angrily. "Didn't I tell you not to do it? He was only a child, but no, you wouldn't listen. Now his blood is on our heads, and for this we will die." The brothers didn't know that the powerful man before them could understand their every word. They couldn't guess why the great man suddenly turned and left the room. Hearing their mournful confessions and their admissions of guilt broke Joseph's heart. He went into another room and wept. He cried for the sorrow of his lost years. He wept for his father's pain and beloved Benjamin's loneliness. He wept that his huge family in Canaan was starving to death. Taking a deep breath, he pulled himself together, dried his face, and returned to the room where his brothers waited fearfully. Through the interpreter, Joseph demanded, "Your brother Simeon will be put in my prison until the rest of you brothers return with this Benjamin. You will see neither me nor Simeon's face again unless you come with your youngest brother." Then Joseph instructed servants to fill all their bags to the top with grain and to secretly put into the mouth of each sack the bag of money each man had brought to pay for the grain. Joseph also ordered sacks of food and water for their trip back to Canaan. Then he had them sent on their way. The men were a day away from Egypt when one of them opened his grain sack to give a little to his donkey. He gasped in astonishment. In the mouth of his sack was his own bag of money. The prime minister had not kept any of it. Showing it to his brothers, he began to groan in worry. "What's going on? Is this a trick to frame me for the theft and then kill us anyway? What is God doing to me?" They barely slept that night and hurried on their way before dawn to get far away from Egypt as fast as they could. When they got home, they honestly told their father everything that had happened and that Simeon would be held prisoner until they returned with Benjamin. If they brought back Benjamin, the prime minister had promised they could continue to come and buy grain as they needed it. Otherwise, Simeon would die horribly, and the rest of their families would starve to death. Even greater was their astonishment as each man unpacked his grain sack and found in every sack the money bags with the brothers' money untouched. Perplexed and anxious, they worried more deeply. "Father, we must take back the money and Benjamin, or surely their great army will come and destroy us all. Why on earth has the prime minister done this to us? It's almost as if he seeks an excuse to kill us. Father, we must do as I've said, or surely we are doomed." Father Israel wept and grieved. "No, no, you have robbed me of my sons. Joseph is dead. Simeon will be killed. And if you take Benjamin, he will be killed as well. I cannot let you do this, even if we all starve." Reuben stepped forward, holding his father's shoulders firmly, and wondering when this once tall man had become a short, bent, white-haired old man. "Father, look into my eyes." He waited until his father lifted wet eyes to meet his own. "Father, I promise you that if you let me take Benjamin, I will bring him home safely. You may kill my own 2 sons if I do not return Benjamin to you unharmed." "No, again, no. I will not let you take Benjamin. He alone is my last link with my beloved wife Rachel. If I should lose him, I would surely die of grief. No more discussion." And so time passed, and the grain they had bought without money was used up. Father Israel called his sons and said, "Go again to Egypt and buy us what food you can get." Judah said firmly, "Father, the governor told us solemnly that he would refuse to sell us anything or even look at us unless we brought Benjamin. If you will send Benjamin, we will go again. If you will not send Benjamin, we will all stay here and starve." Father Israel spoke in anger. Why did you even tell the Prime Minister you had a brother at home? Reuben replied,
We had to. He asked us specifically if we had any other brothers. He even asked us if you were still alive. How could we tell he would ask us to bring Benjamin? We were trying to convince him we were not spies. Could we lie to him? Did you want all of us in prison or dead?
Judah spoke more gently. Father, send Benjamin my own special charge. We will go now so that you and we and our little ones may live. I will be his insurance. If I don't bring him back and set him in front of you, I will bear the blame forever. If you had not made us wait so long between trips, we could have been to Egypt and back by now. Choose for us all, Father, life for everyone or death for everyone. Tears flowed freely down Father Israel's face.
If it must be so, then do it now. But take presents to the Prime Minister of Egypt. We have a few nice things, a little balm for healing, a little honey, some spices, and myrrh, which is valuable. We still have nuts and almonds to give. And Benjamin.
After a few sobs, he continued, You must take double the money that was returned in your sacks and explain that it was some kind of mistake. Oh, may God Almighty give that man a heart of mercy, so I will get my sons back. And if I lose my sons, I will lose my life. Father Israel collapsed, weeping helplessly. The 11 sons, this time, took all their father had told them to take and traveled back to Egypt. On an early morning, they bowed before Joseph again. When Joseph saw Benjamin, he had to hold himself steady so he would not weep. He said in Egyptian to his chief steward,
Bring these men to my house and prepare a huge feast. They will dine with me at noon.
When the brothers understood where they were being taken, they were very distressed, thinking it was some kind of trap. When they arrived at Joseph's palace, they spoke eagerly and nervously to the chief steward, explaining about the money being in their sacks and how they had brought back double the amount. The steward interrupted them to say, Be at peace. Don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, put the money in your sacks. The Prime Minister got the payment he wanted, so don't worry. Oh, and here is your brother Simeon, brought out of prison. The brothers all hugged with relief, even though Simeon was very angry that they had taken so long to get him released. All of the brothers were allowed to feed their livestock, wash up, and get ready for the banquet. They brought out the presents they had prepared for the Prime Minister and bowed to the ground when he came into the room. Through his interpreter, Joseph asked about the health of their father and was glad to learn he was alive and well. Seeing Benjamin, he had his interpreter wish upon the young man extra special blessings. Then, once again, Joseph hurried out of the room, leaving the brothers puzzled. But Joseph had to go to his own room and weep with joy and relief at seeing his beloved brother Benjamin alive, handsome, and well. Wiping his tears, Joseph calmly went back to the banquet room and ordered the meal to be served. Now, the Egyptians thought it was disgusting to eat with Hebrews, so Joseph sat on a higher level to eat, apart from his brothers. All the brothers sat at the other end of the room, being told by the servants where each one should sit. It surprised them that when they were seated, they were all lined up according to their ages. But how could the servants know their ages? Joseph ordered a plate of wonderful food to be placed in front of each hungry man. But Benjamin's plate was 5 times as full as any of the other brothers. What was up with that? They ate a lot of food and drank a lot of wine and got more and more cheerful and less worried. Finally, Joseph decided it was time for them to take the grain they had come for back to Canaan. But Joseph still wasn't through messing with them. Not only did he put all the brothers' money back into their sacks, he also took his own silver drinking cup, very valuable, and put it into Benjamin's sack. Early the next morning, all the sacks were tied shut and loaded on the camels before the brothers came out to lead the animals home. The brothers were barely out of the city when Joseph's next mean trick played out with the help of his chief steward. The steward came to the brothers and said, My master treated you wonderfully, and yet one of you stole his own silver drinking cup." The brothers were insulted and angry. Reuben said, "What are you saying? God forbid any of us would steal from your master. We brought back double the money to pay for the grain. Why would we steal silver or gold? I tell you, if you find that cup on any of us, you can kill that man and take the rest of us as slaves." The steward said, "Whatever you say, I'll look in your sacks." So, surprise, surprise, the cup was found in Benjamin's sack, where the steward had planted it the night before. All of the brothers began to wail and tear their clothes. How could this be happening? Benjamin was not a thief, but they had made a promise and they had to keep it. They all trooped back to Joseph's palace and fell on the ground before him.
"What have you done?" demanded Joseph through his interpreter. "Did you think I would not find out?"
Judah pleaded, "What can we say, my lord? How can we clear ourselves from these weird things that keep happening? Please, my lord, let me speak to you in private." The two went aside with the interpreter, and Judah explained again everything that had happened and how shocked all the brothers were, especially when the silver cup was in Benjamin's bag. He told the prime minister sincerely and solemnly that if they did not bring Benjamin home, their father would have a major stroke and a double heart attack and absolutely for sure die on the spot. Judah wept, tears running down his cheeks and soaking into his beard. "Please, take me instead. Let Benjamin go home with his brothers. I cannot be the cause of my father's death." Joseph stood as if frozen for a moment, then cried out in Egyptian, "Every person leave the room except these brothers." Instantly, all of his servants fled. Then Joseph cried out so loud that everyone in the palace heard his cry. He turned to his brothers and spoke in Hebrew.
"I am Joseph, your brother. Thank God my father is still alive."
His brothers were so shocked and confused, they stood frozen with their mouths open.
Joseph said, "Come near to me, brothers. I really am Joseph, the boy you sold into Egypt 20 years ago."
Some brothers gasped, some turned red, some nearly fainted, but all of them were totally blown away.
Joseph continued, "Don't be grieved or angry with yourselves for selling me. It was not you, but it was God who sent me here long ago to save all your lives now. This famine has been going on for 2 years, but there are still 5 more years to follow. God has made me ruler of Pharaoh's kingdom so I could bring you here to save my family's lives."
When Pharaoh and all his palace heard the story, Pharaoh ordered that wagons should be built so that the brothers could ride home and bring back all of their families to live in Egypt. In this way, Joseph's kin could survive the rest of the famine. Pharaoh picked out the best land for them to live in, which was called Goshen. He was so rich now, he even promised to give them homes and furniture and everything they would need for comfort. The 11 brothers hurried home with the miraculous news that Joseph was not only alive, but was now the governor of all Egypt. They told Father Israel about the wagons, the extra food, and the invitation from Pharaoh to move everyone to Egypt, all expenses paid. At first, Father Israel didn't believe them, so the brothers told him every single thing that had happened, including Joseph's trickery, the returned money, the stolen cup, and that Joseph knew it was all the will of God. When their father Israel finally saw the wagons in person out in front of his tent, he finally believed. In that minute of gladness, he felt like he lost 20 years of grief. Israel smiled and raised his arms to heaven. "It is enough. Joseph, my son, is alive. I will go and see him before I die." And joyfully, he and his entire huge 3-generation family, with all of their friends and servants, moved down to Egypt. The end for now.